Hi there. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. On today's episode, I will be reading the epilogue. It is the last chapter in the book. Now, with her story told, Jessica and Caitlin go their separate ways. But more is in store for Jessica. Now, let's get started. We were transported back to the library. The familiar sights of books and shelves emerged from a cloud of figurative white mist. Caitlin gave me a small smile, looking down at her hands gingerly, almost as if this entire tale had been an embarrassing act. "That's the end of it," she said frankly. "The rest, as you know, is history." I nodded. My notebook was filled with writing, and my tape recorder was nearing a full tape. "Thank you," I told her, rising slowly. "This means so much to me." "In hindsight, I have learned to be not so foolish," she said, rising with me. "I was a snappy young girl back then. I have changed now. I no longer think of life like that." "Do you still believe that trees can give you messages?" I smirked sideways. She laughed. "No, I do not believe that either. I always thought that Gabrielle might have been an elf. She fit the bill so nicely. I had no idea, really." "She sure amassed a comfortable and committed following," I remarked. "Even after she left, there were still people clinging to her. After you left, there was still talk of her. I am sure there are still whispers of her there today. She has become a goddess." "She is mythical," Caitlin said with a smile. "It's a shame things went so sour for us. As you can tell, I do not really have any lifelong friends. Skylar is the closest thing I have to a friend." "Did you ever hear from Gabrielle again?" I asked her. We began to leave the library and started to walk down the hall to the exit of the school. "I did," she remarked. She paused and looked over at me. She would send me periodical letters like that, with no return address but just her initials. They were often nonsensical, and the first 3 she sent me contained nothing but dried grass and leaves. I grinned. Typical forest girl. Once she had learned I had been dethroned, she wrote me short poems and actual letters. They were accusatory and quite angry, but I could not stop them from coming because I did not have her return address. "Evidently they did stop, right?" I asked. The former queen nodded, adjusting her hair. "When I turned 15, they stopped coming. Gabrielle did visit once. We saw each other, and we spoke. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared at her with wide eyes. She came to visit you?" "Yes," Caitlin was almost blushing. "You should have told me this before we left. This is a story I must hear," I remarked frantically, excited. "It was nothing, really," she said quietly. "I'm really quite embarrassed by the whole thing. Now I am even more intrigued." She sighed heavily. "Fine, I will tell you. The year after I left the meadow, Gabrielle came. She had returned to visit her friends, but she did not go to the meadow." "Why?" I inserted. "I had sullied it." I shrunk back a little, aghast at the emphasis on the word. The way she had spoken it made it seem more like disgusting or unclean. Either way, there were apparently too many bad memories for her to go there. "She visited with Mark, that I know." "And then she called upon you?" I probed. Caitlin nodded vigorously. "Please stop interrupting me." There was a little irritation in her tone. I shrunk back and mimed the word sorry. "Yes, she left a message at my house. My little sister Mira had answered the phone. The note from her stated that Gabrielle was one of my oldest and dearest friends. We figured out a lunch date and went to the Top Hat Diner. You must know it." "I've eaten there a dozen times or more," I commented. Top Hat was your usual small-town diner. It served gas station food. There really wasn't much other choice for eateries where we lived unless you wanted Chinese or Italian. Caitlin was setting the scene. The Top Hat Diner on the inside was made to resemble a fine dining eatery. The floor was dirtied old red carpet. The kitchen had black and white linoleum tile. The walls were a beige and yellow vertical stripe, their pattern of repetition never ceasing. The podium where the maitre d' stood was shaped like a black top hat with a red band around it. The menus, sleek and black, featured the same top half motif. Statues of little chubby chefs holding pans and plates decorated the top of the partition walls that separated the table booths. Some of them had colorful canned peppers in unusual jars. The two of them were seated across from one another, hardly a word spoken since arrival. Gabrielle had aged beautifully. She was now an attractive young woman. Her face had grown to accommodate her once large eyes, and they now sparkled like bronzite. Her chestnut hair fell in ripples from her head down to just below her shoulders. She had chosen to wear a forest green dress. Caitlin looked equally as lovely. The former queen had chosen a pink and purple spotted sweater matched with light blue jeans. Her hair at the time had been short cut and intentionally and rebelliously messy, brown and faded blonde. "You're looking well," Caitlin had been the first to speak. Gabrielle had not replied, instead merely studying her as the waitress arrived with the menus. "Why did you ask me out?" Caitlin asked sharply, the moments of silence turning into minutes. "I wanted to see you," she admitted frankly, her face hidden behind the large menu. She then flipped it down quickly, glaring at Caitlin. "So, I was right." Caitlin recoiled as if Gabrielle had spit acid. "What are you talking about?" There was a regarded glimmer in Gabrielle's eyes. "Oh, I think you know. You don't have to admit it, Caitlin. I just wanted to be able to tell you in person that I was right. My prediction had been correct." At first, Caitlin had said nothing. What could be said? Gabrielle Sinclair had been right. Venus had been overthrown as the trees had once foretold. "So, that is all you wanted of me," Caitlin huffed at last. "To humiliate me further? To confirm your suspicions?" Before her friend could respond, the waitress appeared and took their orders. Once the menus had been cleared and their soft drinks refilled, Caitlin wanted answers. "I do not want to say that is the entire truth, but I did want some satisfaction out of it," she admitted. "In the end, you got what you deserved." "Is that how you see it, even after all of these years?" Caitlin shot back. "We are not the same people we were back then, Gabrielle. We are pretty much adults now. All of that happened in the past." "Yes, I can see that plainly," she growled, clenching her teeth. "This is about you getting what you were owed by the forest." "You've already made me atone for my sins," Caitlin said, back, taking a sip from her pop. "All those letters, those leaves, it made me really think." Gabrielle was surprised, her brown eyebrows raised. "They really had an impact?" "Of course," she answered. "Even a year on, I see my mistakes. Some of it, however, I would never change." There was silence. Caitlin knew Gabrielle was thinking about King Thomas being thrown down the hill. "How come you never stopped me?" Caitlin asked frankly. "You had every opportunity, even after Thomas was gone. Yet you stood idle." It was Gabrielle's turn to be silent. She did not speak for several moments, instead contemplating her response. "I don't really have a reason," she confessed. I guess you could say that I didn't feel it right to stage another coup, another rebellion. The children seemed happy. I did not want to wreck that. I did not want the entire meadow to be upset again, thrown into an unbalance." She inhaled sharply and looked over at Caitlin with a kind and compassionate look. "It just wasn't worth it to have a continuous war for the throne." Caitlin nodded. The gravity of Gabrielle's words had settled on her. They were a good enough excuse. "Besides," she added, "at the time there was a shred of hope left in our friendship. Friends never truly betray friends, so I have been told." The two friends, now rekindled, enjoyed lunch that afternoon. Caitlin slowly brought us back to the present, the smoke cloud clearing away the Top Hat Diner, and returning us to the paved street in Everglade Park, dotted with suburban homes. "In the end, we sort of became friends again," Caitlin remarked, putting her hands in her pockets. "We both have such a legacy with Everglade. It still grips us." I nodded. Gabrielle had chosen to do nothing to avoid another mess on the throne. Yet the longer Venus reigned, the messier it became. I suppose it took a new custodian to come in and sweep away the old and restore what had been lost, and that custodian had been me. "You know," I admitted, adjusting my glasses, "if Gabrielle Sinclair had not left, you would have been ousted by her and not me. There was certainly some plots going around, and her name was at the center of a few." Caitlin smirked, a kind of mischievous smirk that revealed she knew all about the plots. "Oh, believe me, I knew. I was the queen, after all. I knew about almost all the plots against me. The 3rd year was enough for her, and she was ready to take action." Caitlin stopped walking and laughed a little. Imagine history had she not moved. We began the long walk home. The evening was upon us, and I could not have been happier for the day spent in the library. Caitlin had given me everything that I needed to complete the story, to truly document our time in the meadow. It felt like I was compiling memories, first with my own tale and now with Caitlin's. The night air was cool and crisp, and I began to think about my cousin Theo. He was playing the Kingdom game at present, and I was wondering about his progress. A blue truck drove by us. "How is your cousin?" Caitlin asked after a moment of silence. It was almost as if Venus had read my mind. I was surprised she had even remembered that I had mentioned him. "Well, I think," I remarked. "He has told me the meadow is quite different from when we played." "Different how?" "They have an emperor," I sighed. I heard Caitlin gasp. "That's intriguing." I nodded. "A very different place, really. However, I have no doubt my cousin will be just fine. He is imaginative, like the two of us. We know the power of imagination in the meadow." Caitlin nodded enthusiastically, with a warm smile on her face. We had reached the end of the street. We would now go our separate ways home. "Thanks again for your story," I said to her, stopping. "This means more than you could ever know." Caitlin beamed, casting away all thoughts of Gabrielle. Our shadows were long now. The orange and yellows of the evening were coming to life. "I am glad you changed my mind about this story. I am happy to relive the past, even if most of it was not so glorious." "It was glorious at some points, you have to admit," I remarked happily, clutching my notepad. "You had a very exciting reign." Caitlin smiled at me for a moment. I could tell she was lost in memories. The sun was setting, the area a colorful array of oranges, yellows, and reds. I shivered. I hated evenings. They had always felt so final, the day ending and coming to a close. It only meant another day was upon us and would begin anew. "Time is such a funny thing," Caitlin remarked. She had said it in such a tone that made it seem like she had a frog in her throat. She was caught on some sort of emotion. She looked up at me then, tears welling in her brown eyes. I could tell she was going through the realization that time moved quicker than we preferred. "It's the only thing we cannot stop," I agreed sadly. "Our time in Everglade is done, but I am happy that it will go on. We can only be proud in what we did in those moments we had there. That place will always be the home of our memories." The girl I knew once as Queen Venus bobbed her head rapidly, shaking herself from sadness. She wiped the tears from her eyes with velocity. "You are right," she said, huffing a little. "Thank you again for a lovely day." She then began to walk away, but before she had gone more than a few steps, she turned back to me. Perhaps sometime we could hang out?" I was startled a little, but a small coy smile grew on my face. I adjusted my glasses. "Yes, of course." When I walked through the door, Abby was lounging in the entry living room. She was reclined on our father's oldest chair. It was a mangled and cut-up brown leather piece of work. It was mechanical, but it often got stuck halfway out and would not go out any further. I could hear our parents watching television in the nearby secondary living room up the short steps. "How did it go?" Abby asked. "She must have told you her entire story. It's almost 8. I nodded and put my stuff down. I went and sat down on the sofa near her. It had darkened considerably outside. The walk home had me preoccupied with endless thoughts about Caitlin, Gabrielle, and Everglade Park. She did. She told me everything she possibly could. There were things I did not even know that had happened. "Such as?" Abby was intrigued. I invited her over to the sofa facing the fireplace. There was a coffee table there, strewn with papers and books. She sat down next to me. Thomas was preceded by his brother, King Titan. Thomas was also convinced to execute his brother, Prince Justin. There are also apparently a great number of elven legends that stem from the Lost Forest. Christopher the Great is a lie. There was no such king. There are so many other things. Abby was surprised. Thomas had brothers? Elves? Really? How exciting! The meadow is truly magic. She rubbed her chin and checked her mobile phone for messages. Makes me want to go back and play again, desperately. I miss those days. I nodded enthusiastically. I wanted to go back too, even if I wasn't the queen. So many of my most magnificent memories had been carved and formed in the meadow. I'm going up to my room to sort through all of these notes that Caitlin gave me. I am compiling them into a book, I remarked, rising slowly. I had already transcribed my first adventures, and now I would complete another, but from the view of Queen Venus. I felt almost like a historian, working to preserve the history of our beloved meadow. Written history for children was often non-existent. Oral history was so important in Everglade. Now I would put pen to paper and record our reigns. A day or two later, I turned my computer on and opened the forums. I had placed an advertisement on the Everglade Park community website some time ago, searching for the boy once known as King Thomas. When Caitlin had initially rejected me, I turned to the internet to find Thomas. I had actually forgotten my listing was there, but was prompted to recall it, as someone had replied to the ad. The name of the boy had matched the one Caitlin told me, Thomas Rosewood. He still lived in the area and was roughly the same age as me. He must have gone to a private school, for I did not know of any Thomas Rosewoods at my school. Now, I was presented with another opportunity, to record the history of King Thomas and what life was like during his predecessor's time. The Rosewoods lived the meadow for many seasons as a dynasty. His story would certainly be as rich and vibrant as Caitlin's. A week later, Thomas was able to meet with me. I remembered to bring my notepad and my trusty tape recorder. Thomas met me in the only place he knew he could, the meadow. It was a brisk, summery evening. The sun was slowly moving below the horizon, but the warmth remained. It had been ages since he had stepped foot on the grass, and I could tell by his faces as I walked up that he was remembering things from a long time ago. Thomas was a bit lanky and of average height. He wore a long khaki trench coat, and his hair was long and wavy strips of chestnut brown. It looked as if it had been professionally dyed, and was now returning to its original color. His coat flapped in the wind as I approached. I gave him a wave, but he simply stood and watched with his hands in his pockets as I walked up. He reminded me of a detective, except he didn't have the matching hat. I had given him a brief synopsis of my idea and a quick message when we exchanged phone numbers and emails. I also did not spare any detail of who I really was. I told him I had ruled the meadow as Queen Isis. He had been simply astonished at the last part. He was even more intrigued to meet me fully when he learned that I was the one who threw Queen Venus down. He admitted that he had heard a few rumors about what the meadow had become, and he openly told me that the name Queen Isis had touched his ears once or twice before. Yet, he did not know to what extent change had occurred at Everglade since his era. I pulled out my notebook and clicked my pen. I was wondering if you would be able to reveal your story to me, if that is okay. It would mean the world to me and the others who are continually evolved in this world. So many of us have little imagination left, except for me. The others of my era are gone. Imagination, Thomas laughed. His voice was strong. It seems to leave your soul when you turn 15 or something like that. So many around me left without much reason, only to blame the loss of their imagination as the root cause. This place is magical, Jessica. You know that. You played the kingdom game, a game fueled by the imagination of children. When it is no longer there, the game loses all meaning. I knew this pain. It was like Caitlin had said. It was a portal, a void, that opened and sucked helpless kids into it, into the real world. Once the dark void closed, those friends became dust and are gone forever. They entered teenhood. Some of us are lucky, like your friends. We retain our imagination, and it continues to inspire us in everyday life as we grow older. I myself still feel it. I can feel the aura of this place even now. While there are no children playing today, I know the kingdom game is in full swing, and someone sits on the throne. How magical, really. There was a flash of silence, a moment of thought. The wind gave a slight breeze and blew through Thomas's long hair. We both could feel the power emanating from this place. I will tell you my story. And through his story, a new generation of Everglade was about to begin. That concludes the epilogue and the novel. I really hope you enjoyed it. It has been a labor of love. Even as I read this podcast to you and reread the books, I have noticed how my writing has improved over time. It is nice to see my craft getting better is all. Next week, I will be concluding the narrative with the author's note. Much of what I talked about in earlier episodes with Queen Elizabeth and Latin will come to light, so stay tuned. After that, I will round out the podcast with an Ask the Author segment, which gives you the opportunity to ask me some questions about anything. See you next time and have a great week. Music for the podcast is Space Journey by Hartzman. You can find all the Chronicles of Everglade novels exclusively on Amazon, and check out my latest novel, The Train to Dranmore, which is also on Amazon. Find us on Instagram and Facebook as well, at The Everglade Chronicles. Thanks for reading, and thank you for your support. See you next time!